episode number 11 of Sports Consiglieres podcast. I'm your host, Jim Whalen, along with my co-host, Jerry Calla. Jerry, when we first talked about starting revamping the show, I was solo for a while. He talked to me about this book. It's over my shoulder. It's called Hotbed on the Hudson County Extraordinary Impact on Basketball in America. So I reached out to the author, and I'm pleased to introduce Rich Kaner from Jersey City. Rich, thank you for your time. This is episode number 11. You're on with Jimmy and Jerry. Just want to talk about what was your inspiration with writing the book.
Well, if you read it, I did a write-up on the genesis for hoopshotbed.com, which pretty much covers that aspect. I mean, for a number of years, I went to, when I was at Lincoln, and for 2 summers, I went to Claire B's camp at New York Military Academy. And that was the predecessor to the 5-star camp, which is, that Howard Garfinkel had, and that most top players in the, East Coast anyway, went to that camp. And there were 4 or 5 Hudson County guys up there. And we used to talk. Bill Madden was one of them that probably the top player from the, standpoint of ability and success. He was a first-team All-County player, as I remember. And we used to talk up there. Other people used to rave about the guys from New York City and Connecticut and Long Island. And, we got talking that, Bill Madden would say, hey, he was a guy a very high-level player. They used to have counselor games at night, in addition to the regular, where the counselors would play, and they would recruit a couple of players if they were short players, and Bill would be one of them. And so he was playing with the top players on a regular basis up there. We were up there for 8 weeks, both summers. And, he used to say, hey, this guy is really highly regarded, but, I'll take some of our guys in Hudson County, Vinnie Ernst, Bill Raftery, George Blaney, those guys that they're every bit as good as, they just don't have don't get the publicity that these guys in New York and Long Island have gotten. So, and it developed from there that, as I agreed with him, of course, because you could see it. Just playing against these guys or with them or against them. And, wasn't made a big point then, but, over the years, I've been to 44 Final Fours, and because I went into the sports marketing and management business a couple of years after my first job with Procter & Gamble and RCA Corporation in marketing. And so used to converse with a lot of people from different areas. And in fact, Jack Neese, former ref player at St. Peter's Prep, and then he started, I'm sure a bunch of people are familiar with him, but he retired. When he retired, he was had the third highest number of games in the NBA at the time he retired.
Well, and for us, for our generation, Jack Neese, I guess his son was on the real world back on MTV. So I remember they referenced Jack Neese. So that was our one. He used to have to show all the grind. So but anyway, not to cut you off.
No problem. He used to tell me that in his travels, going around and then talking with referees as well as just sports people and the different, he used to make the point that he used to have debates and arguments or discussions with people that, hey, they had the best there, for a small county like Hudson, where he came from, that they had, a great number of top level players. And he maintained that if the New Jersey schools could have retained them, signed up a majority of those players, they would have been very competitive over the years and, been in the NCAA or NIT tournaments and all that. But then so the discussion continued over the years. And then when St. Anthony's started their run to be, with national championships, not only New Jersey, the discussion, continued and, got to a point where I said to a few people, I think this is worth a story pursuing, either in book or documentary film for them, and I actually started it around 2015. I mean, I started it seriously with putting together some write-ups and going to people and to see whether any sponsorship or could be developed, to cover some of the costs involved in either a book or a movie. And I put it aside probably in 2016 because I saw, in doing the research for this, I saw another opportunity that I thought might be easier to market. And that was the plethora of Hudson County players that went to Holy Cross. And that being that the Holy Cross had two national championship teams, 1947 NCAA, which Bob Cousy was on, and then 1954 NIT with Togo Palazzi was the MVP. Tom Heinsohn was the co-star with Togo. So I figured it would be a good story, not only the numerous other players that went to Holy Cross like Earl Markey, George Blaney, and a whole slew of others, and most prominently, of course, Togo and Tommy Heinsohn. And we did do a documentary that I'm pleased to say did win 3 national telly awards and 2 Boston/New England Emmys, but we never got it on. There was a little bit of a political battle on political reasons for not getting it on ESPN. But then I went back to, people that knew that I had started the Hoops Hotbed on the Hudson Project, encouraged me to go back. They thought it would be, a couple of people, Bob Hurley was even one that said this story could have been written 20 years ago, and then you could have had a very useful sequel to it 20 years later, because he thought that there were so many, as we've documented, I think there are, and make the 2 points that I try to make in the book, or that I think should be the central themes, is that Hudson, probably the smallest county in New Jersey geographically, has produced more top-level players per capita than any other similarly sized geographic area in the country. And then taking it a step further, a number of those players went on to achieve success at a very high level in sports-related endeavors. And, examples of that would be Paul Tagliabue with the NFL commissioner, Bill Raftery, as a color commentator, and, the Final Four and other collegiate games. I mean, Jack Neese being a top referee, Bob Hurley Jr., Senior being, Hall of Fame coach, and then following, of course, his 2 sons achieving great success, and even other people. There's a section in the book toward the end, the Hudson Hardwood and Beyond, which lists many of the people. There's people that the general public isn't that familiar with, but that did. A guy named Fred Schabel, who played at Union Hill and then went on to play at Duke, was a top level. It might have been he was a vice chairman of Comcast Spectacor, which was part of Comcast. And then a guy named Leon Gast was the producer of When We Were Kings, the documentary on Lee Frazier.
Yes.
And others. John Clune was a great player at St. Peter's Prep and went on to the Naval Academy. His scoring and rebound records were broken by David Robinson. And he went on to, he was in the Air Force. He was the first athletic director at the Air Force Academy. And the basketball facility out at the Air Force Academy is called Clune Arena, excuse me.
Yeah. And you mentioned that in the book about, and I have to say it's chock full of information. Jerry told me about it, so I know Jerry's chopping out the bit. He's a Country Village. Is it Greenville or Country Village?
Hold on, I cannot say it. My wife is from Country Village, and the joke in our house is I'm from Greenville, she's from Country Village. But again, Richard, we chatted a little bit before we got on the air here, and again, for me, like you, I'm a Jersey City guy. So my dad went to Lincoln. So growing up as a little kid, this book really hits a lot of different eras and brings back a lot of good memories for me, because my dad used to rave about how good and underappreciated Elnardo Webster was.
Right.
Being a Lincoln guy, the St. Peter's College team. And then I grew up in the same parish as the Hurleys. I used to go to Mr. Hurley's camp at White Eagle. Bobby Jr. coached me when I was playing basketball at Lady of Mercy. Danny's a few years older than me. And then you look at like other things, like I went to Hudson Catholic. My mother's cousin was on the O'Corin Spinarkle teams, which were legendary. When I was at Hudson, we really didn't fare too well at basketball. So those guys were like gods. I also, when I was at Hudson, my good friend in high school and still to this day, Louis Zampella, his sister Angela, as you know, was a tremendous player for St. Thomas Hoboken product. And then fast forward, I start coaching my daughter's travel basketball team, and every year, every season, I'm coaching 2 games against Tony Nicodemo's son, who's out here in Rutherford. Towns over. So Tony was legendary at Ferris High School. So this covers a lot of different stages of my life coming up, and I thought it was a great book. And I think, not to take a shot at Jimmy here, but I think Jimmy is a New Jersey basketball hoops aficionado, but being from Hudson County, I mean, you really, really, really appreciate this. And like you said, the amount of characters, like if you really break it down, like, you mentioned Paul Tagliabue, of course, Mr. Hurley, I'll never call him Bob, Mr. Hurley, those are the well-knowns, Elnardo Webster. But then if you trickle down, somebody that grew up in my neighborhood, Darren Savino played on that legendary St. Anthony's Friars team. Was in the Final Four with Coach Brown at NJCU, and now Darren's doing a great job. He is Mick Cronin's top assistant at UCLA. Carlos Cueto, great St. Anthony's career, great at Richmond, doing a tremendous job at Union City High School with the girls. So they, like you said, they're just, it's like layer upon layer of people to this day that have gone on to great things, past their playing career. And again, like I'm really talking about, guys in my era. And then if you really go back, you got Jerry. It was still my era. I was younger. You got Jerry Walker. He's an elected official. He just ran for Congress. People are still around. Terry DeHare, again, he's involved in the community. So, to this day, people in this book are really still involved in not only, basketball, but I always say it all comes back to, we used to say it all comes back to Jersey City, but, it all comes back to Hudson County.
Well, and another aspect of it, one of the players that stuck out to me is I didn't realize how good of a player Ray Lucas was. Harrison, and that's another surprise, Harrison's in Hudson County, and how good a basketball player Ray Lucas is. And I think he's also coaching the girls team over in Harrison, if I'm not
he mistaken. Was doing football there.
He was doing football.
Yeah, his daughter was playing for the girls.
Everybody knows him. Everybody knows him from being the Rutgers quarterback, and he did well under Parcells. I mean, Parcells likes Jersey guys, but his mantra was like the more you can do, and that's what Bill Parcells kind of drilled into him. So I use that in my work: the more you can do. But Rich, just getting back to you, you said you were Procter Gamble. Like after that, like, what did you have? I saw that Hubie Brown, he's from Elizabeth. I'm from Elizabeth. Was good luck with the book. How was your game? After Procter Gamble, like, what did you do until you started writing the book? What was?
Well, I was representing players. I worked with Bill Madden was my partner for a number of years. We had a firm called Sports Programmers Inc., and we represented basketball players mostly. Occasionally, 1 or 2 different sports, but it was mostly basketball. And then it developed. Elnardo Webster, when he came out of college, he was drafted by both the Knicks and the Nets. And the Knicks had Cazzie Russell at the 3, which Elnardo would have had to play. And the Nets had Rick Barry at the 3. So we looked to, Elnardo wanted to play, and that would have been, and he couldn't have gotten that with the discussions we had. They weren't, even though the NBA and ABA were sort of at war then, there were some bidding situations for top players, but it didn't seem like Elnardo could get a guaranteed contract. So he wound up signing with an Italian team, And, going through that process, we saw that there was an opportunity for American players that at that time they had what's called the Eastern League. But somebody like Mike Rooney, who didn't make the Lakers, he tried out for the Lakers. He wound up playing in the Eastern League. But Leonardo thought, we thought that the Italian League might be better. It was more money, obviously, and the competition was Terry Driscoll, who was a star at Boston College and was a first-round draft choice, I think, of Detroit. But he wound up going over there because he had a contract dispute with. He never signed with, I believe it's Detroit. So it was, very good competition, and that mushroomed. And a lot of players, being that we were in at the beginning, we started representing a lot of players they wanted to be placed with European teams, or then it spread out to Asia and South America. So I left after about 3 years, actually a little longer. I got out in 63, and probably 68 decided to go full-time in the sports marketing and management business.
Now, Richard, another caveat I love about this is you have a few gentlemen here that had good careers, and I think I was amazed, and I don't know why, but I'll never forget when my father was explaining to me that our ex-mayor Smith was a very, very, very good athlete. Yeah. And, at the same time, or a few years after, you had Mr. Waddleton, Danny Waddleton. He was a councilman in the Jersey City Heights. And again, those are two guys that had, very, very good careers, outside of sports as well. But, I never really thought, I'll never forget, I never thought of, Tommy Smith as an athlete, being so colorful as the mayor. I think a lot of people forgot that, right, as he kind of, moved on into politics and, ran for mayor again after he actually tried making a go at governor, as you know. But my question to you is, what would you say, in your opinion, you grew up, born and raised, Jersey City, Hudson County guy, what would you say would be, if we had to make a movie and you could only pick one decade to choose in Hudson County basketball, what decade would that be?
Yeah, from the best of my recollection, I remember when we were putting together the all-decade teams, which started back in the 1940s. We did it all from the 1940s to 2020 or 2010. I guess we have a partial for 20. I recall the 50s and 60s were loaded. They were tough they had such, I think we had about 15 players per team, and I don't have the book handy, but I just remembering in the 60s, Bill Raftery, Vinnie Ernst, you can even, but the 50s were, had some great players too. Those two stand out in my mind as really loaded with talent. And it was a tough chore eliminating some people that, which is why in a couple of the all-decade teams, we might have gone 2 or 3 over.
Yeah, well, Vinnie Ernst, I read John Thompson's book. He played with him at Providence, and I think he recently passed away. But he was an undersized guard and really a great player for Providence. So,
oh yeah, he was the MVP in the NIT the first, I think, at 61.
So,
and
an interesting fact. Well, and Richard, I was tracking you down. Thanks for meeting up with me, and you also signed a book, which is great. But you also had 4 legends that were Celtics: Hank Finkel, Tommy Heinsohn, John, how do you say it? Mankin, and Tago and Palazzi, who the Tago Palazzi mentioned went to Holy Cross. So they that was in the first cover of the book. So you start off right away, just setting the tone for Hudson County hoops.
Correct. Yeah, of course, Heinsohn. Togo Palazzi was a great player. He was 9 years in the NBA, and I don't even know whether we got to mention in the book. He at one time held the scoring record from, I'm sure Steph Curry broke it. He had 20. He got traded because he admits he made a mistake, and he forced Red Auerbach's hand and asked him to trade him because he was dissatisfied with the amount of playing time. And he got traded to the Syracuse Nationals. And one game when he came back with Syracuse, he scored, I believe, 24 points in the fourth quarter against the Celtics at the Boston Garden. And that record said, so he was a real, he was a productive NBA player. I mean, but, he had they won the NIT in 54, which was a surprise over Duquesne. Duquesne also had a guy named Mickey Winograd from Lincoln High, who was a great player. And the star of their team, one of the stars in his junior year, 54, when they lost to Holy Cross, and then 55 when they beat Dayton in the NIT finals. So, but that 54 team was so good. Ed Sullivan, who, most of the younger people reading the book or hearing about it won't be that familiar with Ed Sullivan, but you guys probably are, I would think. Anyway, John should be. He had a top-notch, the Ed Sullivan Show on Sunday night.
Sure.
The whole country tuned into that.
Yeah, I mean, that was had the Beatles on. That was a staple in the house.
And he used to have people in the audience that players, that sports people from the Yankees and golfers and all that, tennis players. And he was at the game that they beat Duquesne, and he went to the officials of Holy Cross and he said, "What are your travel plans?" They said, "We're taking a train back to Worcester Sunday morning." And he said, "Well, I'd like to have, I want to show that, have mention the team and introduce them." So they said, the school official said, "Well, the only way we would postpone, they thought he was going to want Heinzen and Togo Palazzi, but they said, you have to do the whole team." So he said, "No, I was planning to do it anyway, because I think it was such a great story that you upset the team and the crowd got behind it." So they were on national television, which was unusual. He introduced everybody from all 12 players and the managers and the coaches. And that was something that was unusual on that day.
So Richard, I would be remiss. I don't want to get yelled at because my father watches our podcast. You mentioned the 1960s, and him, like you, being a Lincoln Lion. Let's discuss, because my dad did and does, Harry Laurie.
Oh yeah,
from your out of your high school. Again, I believe he was recruited by Loyola. That was the year, I believe, they won the national
championship. Correct. Right? Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you think, like, because I like to keep a Lincoln theme here. How do you think Harry Laurie stacks up, with the other players? Because you mentioned the 1960s. Would you say he's top 3? I mean, do you want to rank him? I mean, how do you think his career from that era stacks up?
Yeah, well, he was a very effective and successful player. I mean, he, was, now Alnardo was probably the main cog in that St. Peter's team, but he was right close to it. And, I think he would have, he came out at a time when the European teams, many of them were limited in the leagues they played in, were limited to one foreigner, per team. And then they, probably in the 70s, they expanded to 2 in many cases. And he would have been a natural, and a big star over in Europe, I think, had he, had they taken 2 players per team. But,
right.
He was a great all-around athlete in Lincoln, very good quarterback.
Right.
So, great player right up there. I mean, definitely one of the top players in the 60s.
Now again, and just a follow-up question onto that, I like to get your take. I'll give you my answer, and then I'd love to hear your answer. So I'm going to ask you, what's the greatest high school basketball game that you watched in person in Hudson County? So for me, and I'm coming right at Jimmy with this one, for me, it's St. Anthony's Elizabeth at the time, Yanatelli Center, St. Peter's College. Jerry Walker, Jose Ortiz bossed Luther Wright that game. and Bobby Hurley and Terry DeHare destroyed them on the perimeter with a very young Roderick Rhodes in that starting five. I mean, I'll never forget, I was in 8th grade, and I'll never forget Jerry Walker hustling back on defense and pinning Luther Wright's layup, and the crowd went absolutely bananas. So that was my favorite game, my all-time Hudson County game to be in person. So I like to hear yours, sir.
Yeah, my most memorable game was many, many years ago in I believe it was 55 or 56. St. Peter's Prep defeated Memorial at Dickinson High School in the county championship game. John Crotty, who went on to play at North Carolina or attend North Carolina, he made a mistake. He had initially committed to Holy Cross, where his high school coach, Roy Lenig, was coaching, and he changed his mind at the last minute and went to North Carolina. But he put in a running one-hander with like 3 or 4 seconds to go, just about 10 feet past half court, 8 to 10 feet. That was quite an exciting game. And then it's funny, if you recall, I don't know how closely you followed it, this year St. Peter's Prep beat Hudson Catholic with basically a buzzer beater.
Correct. Yes.
And I called John. He was down in Florida, and I called him. I said, I want to have many of the media people called you, and he didn't even know what I was talking about. Nobody did. I guess they weren't around then.
Right.
So they didn't know about it. And but a lot of his schoolmates did call him and say, it took all that while for St. Peter's to have another.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, now that you brought it up, I'm so happy. I had a lot of friends that went to prep. I had my brother-in-law went to St. Peter's Prep, and, you always have that playful rivalry, Hudson and Prep. But I'm so happy for Hudson Catholic and St. Peter's Prep that they're so successful and they're maintaining success. They're sustaining success. And it's good, unfortunately, without St. Anthony's, as that's great for Hudson County basketball. So it's really good to see them, back on top, so to speak.
Right.
Both programs were down for a while, basketball wise. So
yeah, and it's tougher now. I mean, there's recruiting, extensive recruiting, and aggressive recruiting by other high schools in the New York, all over. So it's not just and then I guess the NILs are entering the picture, even with with high school players now to some extent. So
some of these schools are starting NIL. I mean, I guess some states are banning it. I think North Carolina banned it, but I think New Jersey players can get paid in New Jersey to play. So it's an interesting time in sports, in sports right now with that. So it's just but you also had some help, right? You said who out of your, when you say who else helped you write the book? I know you have Jim Haig, I guess, unfortunately passed away. You talked about the FA, who's anybody in Jersey City, about the FA, but you had a lot of these articles, you had people write. Who helped you with the book?
Pete Waversky, we mentioned. I mean, Harvey Zucker, who was the former sports editor of the Jersey Journal for a number of years, assisted in writing and helping put together, some parts of the book from a graphic standpoint. And Jason Bernstein, who writes for New Jersey Media, and I'm sure you guys are probably. He contributed some articles, and then Mike Hogan, who was a former Jersey Journal. So we had about 4 or 5. Yeah, but it was just too much for. I mean, first of all, different periods. People were more familiar with players and coaches from certain periods, so we had to spread it out a little. But one interesting section that I think people will find very interesting is the colorful characters of Hudson County. When I first started this project, and I discussed it with Bill Raftery, he said, you could write a whole book on colorful characters of Hudson County. And, a lot of people agreed with him, but we put down, so there are people that you haven't, Jerry Malloy, I thought was a great article that he was the king of one-liners. He did over 300 sports dinners a year, but he was also an accomplished basketball. And I think Bob Hurley broke his record for most wins by a New Jersey high school basketball coach. I cite the line that they mention, even though it's more for baseball. He was coaching St. Peter's baseball team, college, and they were losing pretty badly, and he walked out to the mound, and the pitcher said, "Hey, coach," as he was approaching, "I can finish this game. I'm not tired." And without hesitation, he said, "Yeah, but the outfield is off." Which I thought was a great line.
Yeah.
And that's many others are cited in that article there that, and that number of people, Mike Rooney, who's one of the greatest players ever, great shooter and scorer. And, he was also considered not only a great player, but a colorful character. And we outlined that in a very extensive article that was written and combined it with Danny Wallerton, who's also a great player.
I tell you, the book is great. It's a good coffee book. It gives up a lot of conversation. Did you get any pushback from anybody? Anybody should be ranked on it? I mean, it brings up a lot of debate, a lot of conversation. Did you get any pushback on it?
Well, I mean, it's been 99% favorable. There was, it's pushback in a negative way that they should have been included. We did so much. We had to start, starting from 1940, we have a section in there, players of distinction for each high school, active and defunct. And there are a couple of, so we based it more on those people, initially on those people that made first, second, third team or honorable mention. Yeah. And then but there were players that didn't get that honor, like Gerald Govan, who played 9 years in the ABA and had a very distinguished career. Well, we knew about him, and we try to check with schools, but there were some schools that didn't play, like Kearney and Harrison didn't play that much of a county schedule for a period of years, so they didn't get, some of those players didn't get the coverage that they should have. But if we ever come up with a supplement, we'll add those guys on as well as some other information.
Somebody I work with, he mentioned Joe Dixon from St. Al's. He was a St. Al's grad. I guess Division II, he led the nation Division II scoring. So he said he should be ranked higher, because I guess the Knicks, not the Celtics, took a look at him. So
was he in? I don't know. Was he
was in the book, but I guess he had a late growth spurt. He was a late bloomer in Division II. So, but I know you gotta run, Rich, but where can people find the book? And I'll once they find it, I'll pass it along to Jerry. He can close this episode out. So,
sure. I mean, they could email at hoopshotbed@gmail.com or text at 973-768-5885, and we'll process the order for them.
Rich, I just want to say, thanks for coming on with us. Like I said, I mean, really, for me personally, this book invokes a lot of good memories. And I tell you, I can't wait. I got to tell my wife. I mean, I want to hear Melissa Hurley's opinion on how good she thinks she looked on the back cover here. Yeah. But I mean, again, like I said, I mean, Lincoln High School, Jersey City, all good memories for me personally. I think you did a great job, on the book. And again, thanks for coming on with us. And, you have anything else that, you think you're going to be working on in the near future, comparable to this, or?
Not right now. A couple of things I'm thinking about, but they're too premature now. But, maybe as far as if you want to get back, touch base at the start of the basketball season or late October, November, maybe we might have some more information update.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we would love to. But listen, Rich, thanks for the books. Thanks for autographing the book. Jerry, thanks for passing along. I mean, it's really is. I mean, there's a lot of information here. A lot for everybody, a lot of debate, a lot of the errors. Like not growing up in Hudson County, you don't realize who was there. But I bought my, I wore my talk about NIL is I wore my 2024 Seton Hall NIT championship. I was waiting to talk about Dan Candrillo. He's also a Hudson County. We didn't get to him, so I mean, so there's a lot. If you want to talk a little bit about that before we cut off, I know you got to run, Rich.
Well, there are a number of Hudson County. Nick Gallis is, was regarded as one of Europe's greatest players because he became a Greek. He had dual citizenship, and so there were a number of guys. Harry, going all the way back to 51 when they won the NIT championship.
Yeah.
Harry of I believe he was Emerson High School. He was the star of the Seton Hall team then.
Yeah, Walter Dukes, so
And then Terry DeHare, Jerry Walker.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you go through the list.
Danny Hurley.
Yeah, and you also had Maris, Donnell Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I mean, as far as that, but
right.
Rich, I can't thank you enough. Jerry, you have anything more for
Rich? All I'm going to say is, again, thanks for coming on, and I have to give credit, unfortunately, to my wife, because my wife comes home from work one day and she was like, her boss, Carl Gargiulo, was like, you have to see this book. You have to see this book. So that piqued my interest. When Jimmy started, we started doing the podcast. I brought it to his attention. So ultimately, you're on and you're spending time with us because my wife actually had a good idea for once. So
thank her. She did.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. Let's do it again.
Absolutely, Rich. Thanks
I'd
again.
like to keep in touch, but you can subscribe, share this episode. It'll be on YouTube. Rich, I'll send it to you. Follow us on social media at Sports Consiglieres on Facebook and on Instagram. We're going to have a couple more episodes coming up. But Rich, thanks for the walk down. And breaking your book. Good luck with the book. It's definitely, if you're in Hudson County, this is a go-to book. But I really appreciate your time. And I really appreciate you coming on and really interesting stories. So I hope that, it turns on more. But anyway, Rich, thanks for your time. And we got to run. And then this episode was produced by Dave Sturcio, Chop Sports Media, also assistant with my son, Jimmy Whalen Jr. And find us on social media. And this is Jimmy and Jerry, episode number 11, Sports Consiglieres signing off.